During the Second World War, the US Army Air Force flew thousands of sorties as part of the wider Allied tactical bombing campaign. These bombers were tasked with attacking airfields, logistics, infrastructure, and enemy forces themselves. The Americans flew these missions in two different aircraft, the B-25 Mitchell and the B-26 Marauder. The B-25 and B-26 were both twin-engined medium bombers with around the same speed, range, bomb load, and defensive armament. By the end of the war, 9,816 B-25s had been produced, along with 5,157 B-26s. But the numbers from wartime reports suggest something strange. One of these bombers was significantly better than the other. In fact, one of these aircraft was 60% less likely to be lost in an accident, 80% less likely to be shot down by the enemy, and 40% cheaper. For now, I'll let you guess which one it is, but you may be surprised. Let's take a look into how those insane numbers were even remotely possible. Both these aircraft were designed to the same requirement, which was issued in March 1939. It called for a twin-engined medium bomber with a top speed of over 300 miles per hour, preferably 350 miles per hour, a range of 2,000 miles, and a bomb load of 3,000 pounds. This requirement was essentially asking for an aircraft as fast as a contemporary fighter, but with a bomb load of a heavy bomber, albeit with about half the range. The competition was soon down to two, with the Martin Model 179 emerging as the winner of the contract, beating North American's NA-62. But for redundancy, both were ordered, and both would be ordered into production without a single prototype being built, something that the US would soon call off-the-shelf procurement. The aircraft being procured were both twin-engine, all-metal mid-wing monoplanes, with the same amount of machine guns and the same combat bomb load, but had very different philosophies. North American's NA-62, which would enter service as the B-25 Mitchell, was an evolution of their earlier NA-40, which had flown in 1939, but suffered from handling and stability problems. For the B-25, North American focused on building a stable, forgiving aircraft with a large wing and low wing loading, providing a relatively low stall speed and predictable turning characteristics. The B-25 was powered by two R2600 twin Cyclone engines, each putting out about 1,700 horsepower and giving the aircraft a top speed of around 287 miles per hour. The team at Martin wanted more. They optimized their design for speed and aimed to get as close as possible to the 350 miles per hour target set by the Air Corps, using a sleek, streamlined fuselage and a relatively small, high-aspect wing design with two massive R2800 double Wasps. The Martin manuals are quite annoying, as they quote top sustainable speeds, which is only at about 1,500 horsepower per engine rather than the actual maximum of 1,850. But even at this lower power, the Marauder was able to reach 321 miles per hour. This is ridiculously fast for a bomber, faster than a lot of fighters in 1940, and no doubt this is one of the main reasons why the B-26 was preferred by the Air Corps. But when actual B-26s began to take to the skies in November 1940, it became clear this speed was a double-edged sword. The high wing loading meant that the takeoff and landing speed for the B-26 was much faster than the B-25, requiring more pilot skill and longer runways. It also meant that losing an engine during takeoff or landing was a much more significant problem that often led to the pilot losing control of the aircraft. This report compares the accident rates of both bombers from July 1942 to March 1943, showing that the accident rate per 1,000 hours flying was 1.355 for the B-26, but only 0.85 for the B-25, a 60% higher rate. And these weren't minor accidents either. The fatal accident rate for the B-26 was 0.46 per 1,000 hours flying, while the B-25's was only 0.26, so 80% higher. In training units, the rate of accidents was incredibly high for the B-26 crews. It collected a lot of nicknames as a result. We've got Widowmaker, Martin Murderer, Flying Coffin, Flying Prostitute, and my personal favourite, B-Crash. These statistics also show that the B-26 was faring poorly in combat, flying missions in the Mediterranean. Each B-26, on average, would fly 2.8 sorties per month. Each B-25 would fly 5.1 sorties per month, doing over 80% more work than the B-26s. During the same period, the loss rates were also worked out, 2.4% per sortie for the B-25 and a whopping 5% for the B-26. It was 79% more likely to be shot down by the enemy and 220% more likely to be lost through other causes. It was also, bizarrely, significantly more expensive than the Mitchell. Even by 1943, with production in full swing, its unit cost remained about 40% higher. Meanwhile, the B-25's reputation was only improving. Its forgiving handling and low takeoff speed allowed it to participate in the Doolittle raid of April 1942, launching from aircraft carriers to bomb Tokyo and becoming an icon of America's air power back home. Widowmaker versus Doolittle Raider. It would be easy, and not entirely wrong, to end the video here, conclude that the B-26 was a death trap and the B-25 was brilliant, and move on with our lives. But it doesn't show the full picture, or really any of the picture. And I can prove it. Have a look at these stats from March 1944 to May 1945. The B-26 actually has the lowest overall loss rate of any of America's combat aircraft in the European theatre, averaging more than 1,000 hours per lost aircraft. And this includes non-operational losses. So what changed? Well, the first and easiest change was to pilot training. The top brass basically handed a B-26 to Jimmy Doolittle, of Doolittle raid fame, and asked him to evaluate the aircraft, put it through its paces, and work out its strengths and weaknesses. And he found that while the B-26 was tricky to fly, there was nothing actually wrong with it, and found it could even land and take off with one engine, something many had thought was impossible. They enlisted Doolittle to write the new training program for B-26 pilots, who would now have a much better grasp of the limits of their aircraft, as well as how to make the most of their strengths. Having a grasp of the actual strengths and weaknesses of your aircraft is essential for flying properly. If an enemy knows your weaknesses and you don't, you could find yourself quickly in a lot of trouble. And it's the same for your personal data, which is why for this video I have partnered with Incogni. As we'll find out, the Marauder had a whole host of deadly technical problems just sitting under the surface, waiting for their chance to emerge and ruin everyone's day. And you, dear viewer, have a similar issue. Your data is scattered all over the internet, from your full name, email, phone number, education, political affiliations, health and finance information. Chances are that it's out there, and like a faulty engine diaphragm, people can use these weaknesses to scam you, steal your identity, and more. Health insurers have even been known to buy your data on health and fitness just to have an excuse to raise your rates. Incogni stops this by removing your personal data before these bad actors can get to it. Data brokers, people search sites, commercial databases, the kind of places that store, leak, or even sell data. Incogni submits removal requests on your behalf, and their custom removals feature allows you to submit any website to their privacy agent, who will then make the request for you. As we will see, the hidden issues of the B-26 essentially ruined its reputation. You don't want that for yourself. Sign up to Incogni today using code RED, or click the link in the description to get a whopping 60% off an Incogni annual plan. Your future self will thank you. But for now, back to the past, to the technical issues plaguing Martin's B-26. See, it's easy to forget just how cutting edge this aircraft was. Tricycle landing gear, a powered gun turret, widespread use of plastic, and brand new R2800 double wasp engines driving Curtiss electric constant speed propellers. The double wasp was a very reliable, very solid engine that would go on to power the Hellcat, Bearcat, Thunderbolt, Invader, DC-6, Lockheed Constellation with flying colours. But in the early years of the war, it had serious problems. It was not as reliable, it was difficult to maintain, it had a habit of failing during takeoff thanks to faulty diaphragms, and it was the B-26 and her crews that would bear the brunt of these teething problems back in 1942 and 1943. Even if the engine's working okay, the constant speed propeller had issues. If you're not familiar with what these are, they essentially rotate the propeller blades to offer more or less bite on the air. It's sort of like the gears of your car. You want more resistance, more torque when you're accelerating, then you can switch into a lower resistance, higher gear and whiz along at speed. It was a huge improvement. But if constant propellers fail, they get stuck on their current pitch setting. Imagine trying to drive a car when your left wheels are in 6th gear and your right wheels are in 1st. It's not good. This propeller failure would occur most often during takeoff, running out of electric power due to the Marauder's battery being drained while it was sitting on the tarmac preparing for a mission. And so these two factors, engine, propeller were to blame for many lost B-26s, and it wasn't really the fault of her crews or designers, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be fixed. Soon, B-26 ground crews were issued with battery carts and wired the aircraft up to these before a mission, so the onboard power supplies were always at maximum charge, meaning no stock propellers. The B-26 also received newer, far more reliable engines, upgrading from the R2800-5 to the R2800-41 or 43, enjoying a 300 horsepower boost as it did so. This would become standard in most B models and all C, F and G model Marauders. But despite these upgrades, the B-26 still had that small wing, until early 1943 at least. See, a committee had been formed in the US Senate to investigate defense spending, focusing on contracting abuses. It was chaired by future President Harry S. Truman, who asked Glenn Martin why the B-26 was having problems. Martin responded by saying that the wings were too short and that plans to replace it with a brand new wing were very near to completion. Truman curtly responded that the size of the wing needed to be improved right now, or Martin would lose the contract. So, Martin improvised. Instead of designing an entirely new wing for the Marauder and completely torpedoing the production numbers, they simply extended the existing one, adding about 3 feet to each side, which, along with a bigger tail, alleviated many of the handling issues. These changes were first put into the B-26 B-10, which entered service in February 1943. Remember, those earlier statistics were only up to March 1943, i.e. they only included aircraft with the older, smaller wing. So, you see, the Marauder was a very dangerous aircraft, until it wasn't. These changes transformed the Widowmaker into a very capable medium bomber. It was fast, reliable, and importantly, accurate. Well, more accurate than the B-25 at least. 19% of bombs hit within 200 feet compared to 17% for the B-25 when dropping from 12,000 feet. For about 1943, the Mitchell would serve almost exclusively in the Pacific. Its superior ground clearance and shorter takeoff roll made it a better fit for the somewhat lacking runways of the Pacific Islands. Meanwhile, the Marauder served in Europe, operating from nice long tarmac runways in England and doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the weeks and months leading up to D-Day. Before Allied troops hit the beach on the 6th of June 1944, Allied bombers were tasked with destroying defences along the Atlantic Wall. The B-26s were the only bombers to hit their target, Utah Beach, with any meaningful effect. Utah would be taken with less than 200 casualties on Invasion Day, but you don't hear about this, because to talk about the success of the B-26 would mean you also had to discuss the failures of the heavy bombers to hit any of the other beaches. In conclusion, the B-25 and B-26 were both incredible aircraft, but the B-25 was successful from the very beginning, hitting the ground running and quickly developing a reputation as a reliable medium bomber that could go wallop the Japanese and return safely. The B-26 was a high-risk, high-reward design, and unfortunately, that risk was all placed on the men who flew them between 1942 and 1943, before the problems were worked out with the engines, propellers and wings. By the end of the war, it was an excellent aircraft that was fast and was modern and did bomb relatively accurately, but it was never able to shake its poor reputation and remains largely forgotten among the more famous American bombers of the Second World War. Part of the reason for this was that it wasn't even the only B-26. The A-26 Invader entered service in 1944 as an attack aircraft, but following the retirement of the Marauder after the war, the A-26 stole its designation. So while B-26s did serve in Korea and Vietnam, these were all Invaders, not Marauders. If you enjoyed this comparison, I'd highly recommend you check out my similar videos comparing the B-17 and B-24 with the Lancaster and Halifax. If you have any ideas for more videos like these, do leave them down below. And while you're at it, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep the videos coming, and it also tells YouTube that you like videos made by actual humans rather than AI. If you really want to support a human creator, I'd ask if you consider supporting me on Patreon to get all my videos early and ad-free, as well as access to exclusive videos like this one, and this one. As always, thanks to all those already supporting me on there. I genuinely couldn't do it without you. And I'll see you all next time.